I went on a jog through the Domain and the botanical gardens a couple days ago when the weather still supported it. And I was reminded how when my son was really young, my wife and I would pack up a blanket and a picnic lunch, and we'd go down to the botanical gardens and lay out the blanket and put my son on it, and we'd sit there and have a picnic. Now, he was quite young, and he did something really funny. He would crawl to the edge of the blanket, put out his hand, and touch the grass and pull his hand back, and he wouldn't get off the blanket. He just was not going to get into the grass. And I feel that's sort of like how companies are with social media inside. They're willing to have it out connecting. We've heard brilliant talks about how you can be using social media for recruitment, but we haven't talked so much about using it internally for organizational development. And yet that's a powerful opportunity to develop our people, our performance management, our learning and development paths with social media. So that's what I'm talking about today. In Talent 2.0, I would be embarrassed to try and talk about recruitment with social media, but I want to talk about how it touches out there, and some examples may spring to mind about how we can use this to advance. Why are we talking about this? Who recognizes what this is? Fractal, right? To me, it's the face of chaos. And this is how the world works, really. It's chaos. And in the past, we thought we could plan and prepare because there are patterns there. They're just, you can never predict at any point where it's going to go. So we thought we saw patterns so we could plan and prepare, and we could explain away the changes. But as things are moving faster, as competitors get tougher, as information becomes more, no longer can we take the time. We've got to become more agile, more nimble. And how does that happen? How do we become organizations that can adapt more quickly? And I want to suggest that it takes a village. It isn't done by one person. It isn't done by just that really brilliant one individual. The myth of individual innovation has been thoroughly debunked. Keith Sawyer gave us a wonderful case study at a conference I was at where he talked about the history of the board game Monopoly and how it had actually emerged from some previous work by somebody else, and it had manipulations, and it changed over time, and lots of people contributed to it. So how do we tap into this power, this need to be able to take advantage of people and have them working together? If you're on Twitter and following the hashtag, I think, I'll cross my fingers, that I have instrumented this so as I go through my slides, it's actually going to tweet out links relevant to the slide I'm on. Fingers crossed. If somebody's actually on Twitter when this next one, you can tell me if a tweet comes out and has a link in it with the ATC Sydney. Just a little bit about my twisted background and the strange way I look at the world so you understand the filters I'm bringing to bear. As we mentioned, background in cognitive science, but first I saw the connection between computers and learning as an undergraduate, and ended up designing my own major doing that. And I went out and worked in the real world for a couple years designing and programming educational computer games. And so games have been a recurrent theme in my work. My first book was on how do you design learning games. I started going out and working with organizations, went back and got a PhD in applied cognitive science, really understanding, my PhD advisor was a guru of how do we design systems for the way people really think. And my twist on that was how do we design systems for the way people really learn. And along the way, I've looked at cognitive learning, behavioral learning, social learning. I've looked at machine learning and trying to understand how can we do this better. But as I started designing really cool things like games, and we had a virtual conference back in the mid-90s and an online web competition for school kids, I began to realize that there's a role for formal learning, but there's other times we need other types of support, performance support and e-community. And so I started working with organizations at the more strategic level, and in particular recognized that informal learning and communities practice in the social learning is really powerful. Now my buddy Jay Cross, who lives just a ways away from me, we met, found out we're simpatico. We were talking about meta learning a long time ago, and he came out with his book Informal Learning and was going out talking to companies about social learning. He said, wait a minute, I'm doing this alone. This is contrary to what I'm talking about. So we brought in our colleagues Jane Hart and Harold Yarkey and Charles Jennings, and together we're the Internet Time Alliance, and we work with organizations, specifically in the social space. So I want to give them a shout out because a lot of my thinking we have co-developed using the social technologies we're talking about to continue to develop our own understanding and meet needs. So let me ask, how many of you are on Facebook? We heard a lot about LinkedIn, a lot of Facebook. Okay, keep your hands up. Now, drop them, keep your hands up still if you're using it to connect to colleagues, professional colleagues, not family, but you're actually using it for work-related network. Wow. Did you see that change? Did you see that? We almost suddenly got no more hands up. Thank you very much. That's amazing to me. And you may think LinkedIn is the right place to be doing the professional connection, but I want to suggest that LinkedIn is good for certain types of things, but it's not as useful to me in connecting with my professional colleagues. How about, again, how many on Twitter? Oh, wow, that's great. How many of you are using it to connect to professional colleagues and stay in touch? And if you don't know about it, by the way, Friday mornings, it's Thursday afternoons, thank you. Friday mornings here, Thursday afternoons and Thursday mornings in the US, we run Learn Chat, where we have a series of questions for an hour and a half that are tweeted out, and then people just discuss it with Twitter. Very powerful learning model. People get divergent instead of convergent. And we hear lots of different perspectives. It's a great learning experience. Finally, Skype, particularly here where you got to reach out internationally. It's cheaper than using the phone, right? But how about keeping a Skype chat open with a couple people for professional development? Not so much. These are tools you can and should be thinking about using to develop yourselves in what you do. Stay connected with colleagues, not just within your organization. Now, I want to talk briefly. How many of you think that the social media is much more for the younger generation and because there's a lot of talk about digital natives and the generational differences, and I want to debunk that. The Joint Information Systems Committee and the British Library did a joint study, and they looked at this youth using technology, and their conclusion was that they were anything but expert at using it. They use it, but they don't use it well. They don't necessarily write good search strings, and they don't really evaluate well the products that they get back. So just the fact that they're using the technology doesn't mean they're expert in it in any sense. Further, AchieveGlobal did a study where they looked at what people wanted as rewards from employment, whether they wanted recognition or money or flexibility in their job or career growth. And they stratified the results by the generations. Guess what? There was no significant difference. They were not finding people wanted rewards differently. So I want to suggest that actually characterizing people by generation, by age, is as much discrimination as discrimination by gender, ethnicity, sexual preference, whatever. It's discrimination still. Address them as individuals. People vary on how confident they are with technology and how competent they are with technology. Interestingly, 80% of people think they're above average. The youth in particular overestimate their own competency with technology, but the empirical evidence is that they're not particularly good. So don't, do it. You don't want to know exactly how old I am. I'm over 50, and yet I use technology better. My 13-year-old kid still comes to me for help trying to figure out how to do things, okay? So it's not by age, it's by your individual capability. It's really situational leadership. Find out where they are and do your interventions with them based upon who they are, not just by some arbitrary categorization. Okay, that okay with you now? I don't want to, okay, now I'm getting off my editorial soapbox and we're going on with the presentation. So why do we care? Why is this important? What is happening now that makes this interesting and relevant to what we're doing? How many of you remember back to the early days of the World Wide Web? It was hard to get content up. You had to be able to figure out a server, get a message out to a domain name server to point to it, get the files, this arcane syntax. You had to figure out where to put it in the right directory to have everything linked together and work together. Not everybody could do this. The people who could were the producers. They owned the message on the web. But as they did that, and they got more powerful tools like JavaScript, they created environments where other people could put content onto their server. And so now anybody could get content on the web. And that's Web 2.0. We've moved from producer-generated content to user-generated content. And this is important. The next generation is system-generated content. We're already seeing this. As I think was Gibson said, you know, the future is already here. It's just not equally distributed. You know, we have system-generated content. How many of you have gone to Amazon and seen recommendations? That's system-generated content. That's not hand-coded in there. The system looks at patterns of what other people have done and figures and uses rules to generate what you should see. There's a lot more we could be doing there, but that's not the topic today. That's something I'd be happy to talk about some other time. Right now, I want to talk about user-generated content. And what we have going on here is, at core, what Brent Schlenker of the e-learning guild, one of my buddies, talks about the 5-ables. The 5-ables that make social media work. First of all, it's got to be findable. The ability to go out and find what people are creating and putting on the web is really critical. And we're glad we have those bots from Google running around trolling all our information to figure out what is there and where it is, and so when we search for it, we find it. But it also can be feedable. You can select what you want to follow. With all that information out there, how do you manage it? My colleague Harold Yarkey talks about personal knowledge management as a coming suite of skills that people need to have. But you can find somebody who's looking at stuff and follow them. And then they will point you to the stuff they think is interesting. And if you follow the right people, you can get a really good sense of what's important and new. People in this space. Kevin Wheeler has a blog, okay? If you're not reading it, you're missing out. And so we can start subscribing to particular information. And then linkable. He doesn't have to send you all the content to things he's finding interesting. He can send you links, just pointers. And you can exchange pointers to content instead of the content itself, which makes life much easier, lower bandwidth, and yet is really powerful and valuable set of concepts. So we now can be pointing to interesting things. And taggable. We add information. And as people add extra information and tag things, they're adding value. They're adding extra value to that information, making it more valuable. And this is the path we're on. And the final one is editable. We can now add information. A little small, sort of blip on the internet called Wikipedia. No central management, really. All user-generated, evaluated as more accurate than Encyclopedia Britannica, totally controlled with a top-down expert approach. Just coming from the community, a few simple rules about who and how you interact, and they get valuable data. Anybody ever go to Wikipedia for some information? Yeah, I think so. So these tools proliferate. And my colleague Jane Hart, who has a blog called the E-Learning Tool of the Day, and she really stays on top of all the different tools, has talked here about 30 ways to use social media, and particularly categorized it into 7 areas of ways that you might be able to use this data. To share resources, to collaborate, to improve productivity, to find things, to keep up to date, build a network, communicating with colleagues. Powerful things about our knowledge work. And I want to suggest that what's going to make a difference to your organization is not going to be the ability to do rote learning, not the ability to remember arbitrary information, but instead the ability to make better decisions. We heard Professor De Freitas this morning talk about games as ways to get people doing a deep practice on the important decisions. And we need to empower people to be better at that and give them the tools to do that, and this is what we have, our tools to do knowledge work. The knowledge work is what's going to give you the continual innovation you need. Optimal execution is just going to be the cost of entry, and continual innovation is going to be the only differentiator for your organization. The people you're looking to recruit, you want to find the people who have the skills to communicate and work and play well with others. We suggest are the new suite of skills for success in the future. In short, it's very simple. The more people you can tap into in an effective way, the more good stuff happens. Whether it's leads, businesses, sales, closing deals, performance, productivity, it really gets better if you can tap into the power of people to add value to what you're doing. And the cost of social media is going down, And the cost of not using social media is going up. We're already past the point where they intersect. How many of you have heard of United Breaks Guitars? Oh, that's not so many. Fabulous story. A cautionary tale. This band was on a plane, and the guy heard the lady beside looking out the window going, "Oh my gosh, they're breaking guitars." And indeed, when they landed and got their luggage, they found it was their guitars that had broken. Now, he didn't immediately go complain and put it out in public. He tried to get help through the company. He tried once. He tried twice. He tried 3 times. And finally, he got fed up and he wrote a song. And they made a music video of it. And they put it up on the web. I want you to notice that number in the lower right-hand corner. 10 million views of this video. Do you right now want to fly United, or maybe Virgin, or Qantas, or anybody else but United? It was not a good public relations situation. And that's what happens with user-generated content. The companies can no longer control the flow of information. Remember the old media, print and television and radio. Somebody gave information to you, and you had to decide to accept it or not, but you couldn't debate it back and forth with other people so well. But now we have user-generated communication and content. And people can start creating their own stories about what's going on and what they think of products, because anybody can put information out there on the web and it can be found. So you no longer control it. And in the late 90s, 4 very prescient people recognized that this changes the game in a fundamental way. And they wrote the Clue Train Manifesto, which is a book about this thinking. They have 95 theses that are sort of core to this. And the first one is that now markets are conversations. And you have to be authentic to be out there. If you're not, it becomes very clear very quickly. One example, Marriott had a blog out there, supposedly by the CEO. It was written by a PR flack, and it was very obviously written by a PR flack. And they took it down because it got a lot of bad press. So you want to start being clear. Now the question is, this is looking outward, but what does this mean for our organizations? What does this mean for learning in the organization? Don Tapscott, author of Wikinomics, I love this quote. The ability to integrate the talents of dispersed individuals and organizations is becoming the defining competency for managers and firms. Taking different talents and be able to integrate them and get the effective use of them is going to be what's going to be critically necessary to survive going forward. A person like Kevin Wheeler can get his word out there. I love it. Today's success is in the hands of creative people, the people you're trying to get. These people are hard to find and hard to keep. It's been this recurrent story I've been hearing here at the conference. They thrive in a networked world. They thrive in a networked world. So how do we give them a networked world in which to thrive? I heard the story, it's possibly apocryphal, but it was conveyed to me at a conference last December. So I'll portray it in sort of a generic parable. This firm, the principals were looking at the associates to see, the new associates, to see how they were doing. And one of them was way outperforming the other ones, and they got really curious. How is this happening? How is this person succeeding? And so they decided to ask her, and they said, how are you doing this learning? And, how are you out succeeding everybody? She said, you really want to know? They went, yeah, we really want to know. She said, in the bathroom. In the bathroom? Yeah, that's where I can whip out my phone and connect to my network and get the answers I can't get in my desktop because you block access to the network. So the point is, people are no longer what's in their heads. People are who they're connected to as well. And the more people and the more effective they are at using the network, the more capable they are. So Burson and Associates did a study in 2008 of how people were using social media for the organization. And the classic one everybody thinks of are customer communities for loyalty and marketing and self-service. And We see onboarding and recruiting, and we've heard a lot about that already yesterday. Corporate alumni and retiree relations, that one's interesting to me, going on the back end. IBM has an alumni network in Facebook where they can keep in touch with people, and that, not all that tacit knowledge has walked out the door. Succession planning, but also corporate intranets, sometimes replacing traditional intranets. Corporate communications, employee directories, project or process collaboration or support, knowledge sharing, support for formal training. Extending the formal training, really critical, because the massed event for training doesn't work. I'm not giving that talk today, but trust me. The point is, as we develop our people, they need different types of support. As novices, they need full formal learning. As novices, they don't know what they need to know, and they don't know a lot about the context, so you can wrap it up with the full formal presentations, the full learning experience. But as they become practitioners, the value of formal learning goes away. They know what they need to know. They just need access to it. And then as they become experts, there isn't any answers out there. The only way answers come are from the experts interacting together to create new knowledge. So the value of formal falls away and the value of informal comes in. What we want to say is not leave that to chance. We don't want to just say, oh, well, they can take care of it themselves, because the evidence is that people are not necessarily great self-learners. Universities that started putting courses online found out that some 10% were really succeeding and the 90% weren't. And it was because they weren't good at learning. As soon as they put in help for people to become better learners as part of their anything, their succession rates went up significantly. So we need to think about how do we support this. And this is a lot of what I do, is help organizations start treating that whole, what I call the performance ecosystem, the support for people to do their jobs, all the resources, so they're to hand and they're focused on the tasks, they're not going away. Study shows that, I may have the figures roughly wrong, but people spend at least 30% of their time during the day searching for information. And 40% of that time, they fail. They don't find what they need. Well, that's a lot of wasted energy. Can we increase that? So learning is just a small part of this whole picture, and we need improved instructional design, which is what games and other things are. But performance support, we need people to have the tools to hand, the resources, the job aids. E-community, well, greater integration, tying these systems together so that from the user's perspective, it's a coherent environment. Instead of portals, we've got hundreds of them. Nobody can find anything. Broader distribution means bringing that support wherever they are, mobile learning. And e-community, which is what we're talking about today. This is the biggest missed opportunity in organizations, the ability to support people helping one another. Now, I tried to map out the whole talent management picture, and I'm not a talent expert, so I did a little research, and I came up with this model and tried to figure out how I'd pat social media to it. And sorry, I thought it was too complex. I think of just in terms of external communications with customers and prospective candidates, and internal communications, developing ourselves and our ability to do the jobs. So let's start with blogs. How many here know what a blog is? Excellent. So the online personal journal. How many here blog? Oh, I like to see those hands back there. Excellent. It's a personal journal. You put your thoughts out there. A personal journal is really nice. It causes you to think. Those of you who blog there, you find out when you are forced to put your thoughts there, you have to rethink it. You find that it makes you think, because it's really easy to think it, but when you try and make it concrete and communicate to somebody else, sometimes you find some flaws in thinking. So it's a really powerful tool just to think for yourself. But a public journal on the web that other people can read and comment on is, if you're willing to risk the chance of being wrong, what a great learning opportunity. People can give you feedback. People can challenge you. You can ask questions and they can respond. You begin to have a conversation. They're adding value to your thinking. Couple success stories. Google has an online blog. Lots of companies have blogs, and when they're authentic and real, you can see what new products are coming. One of my favorite pieces of software on the Macintosh is called OmniGraffle, because I diagram, like you saw the diagram a couple screens ago. This makes it easy. So I go to their site and track what new products and what updates they're coming up with through their blog, where they put their thinking out there and their product directions. Really cool, authentic way to build brand value, which makes people think, oh, these people are cool, I might want to work with them. Internal. I heard this story. I was running an e-learning strategy workshop a couple years ago when things were at their worst, and this guy reported a story from his company. They're a manufacturing supplier. Their customers are manufacturers. And when 2009 hit manufacturing, their business was in threat. His CEO had a blog internal. He didn't talk about all the things they were considering, but he talked regularly about how hard the executives were working trying to figure out a way to survive in this tough environment. It really built his loyalty to the company. He really was impressed and felt supported by hearing that his boss really cared about trying to make this succeed and keep their jobs and not have to fire people. Great communication tool. Lots of other things you can do with it. You can talk about product directions. You can use it internally for teams. But it's a really good tool to have regular updates and create dialogue. And dialogue is what it's about. Conversations are the engines of business. Nothing happens without a discussion. Mergers, acquisitions, hiring, everything happens through conversations. Why do you want to not facilitate those and make them as effective as possible? So discussion forums are a dialogue, a conversation around the water cooler. You can put things up, you have a limited list, you can ask questions, you can get feedback. Ford wanted to have a dialogue with its customers about some new directions it was going, created a dialogue discussion forum called Sync My Ride, not Pimp My Ride, Sync My Ride. And they got great feedback and dialogues going with their customers that led to new product decisions. Ace Hardware had these old guys who knew stuff. You don't need a L bracket for that, you need a T square, whatever it is. They knew this stuff. The new guys didn't know it. They created a discussion forum where the new guys could ask stuff and the older guys could respond, and they started that transfer of knowledge, not just in store, but across stores. How many of you are worried about some of the talent you have in your organization retiring and leaving with a lot of tacit knowledge left going out with it? Yeah, this is a real problem corporations are facing. How do you get that? They used to try to do knowledge management, which was formal systems that tried to call for knowledge. They found out that it pulled the knowledge out of context. It was really hard. It didn't work that well. Conversations, dialogue, discussion is the way to get that knowledge out there and transfer it ahead, because we understand stories. We don't understand statistics. Collaboration, working together to create something is really powerful. If you're not co-located, how do you do it? Well, I'm sure most of you know what a wiki is. Not the Hawaiian drink, although it did come from a Hawaiian term, wiki. It's a collaborative place. It's a collaborative web page. It's a place where people can work together to create understandings. And they can add, and you can add, and you can, how many of you have used wikis to create proposals or to write up documents or to do things internally? Only a couple of hands? How do you work? If you're still emailing Microsoft Word documents back and forth, I'm sorry, you're wasting a lot of time. This doesn't work well. Sun, responsible for Java up until their acquisition by Oracle, and now Oracle is responsible for the development of Java. They wanted the developers to have an input into the development path. So they created a wiki and created a dialogue with their fellow developers to help figure out the forward path for Java development. Very powerful. Intel inside had a wiki. They've had a problem. New people come into the firm and they acquire companies with a whole different set of terminologies, and this is deep stuff. Semi-processed. I used to understand it up through risk, and then recently I read an article that summarized the development since risk, and man, it's awesome stuff. It just gets out in the weeds. It's very complex. There's incredible vocabularies. Now, when somebody new comes in and doesn't understand anything, they have two options right now, right? They either don't ask what that term means, and then they don't understand all of the subsequent conversation, or they break the flow of the meeting to find out what it means, and in the meantime may lose track of the conversation. Intel did a number of things with wikis, but one of the best returns on investment for them has been a glossary. They just put in the vocabulary. And people in the meeting can go on and look it up and go on. How many of you have in a meeting heard a term you didn't know, and rather than interrupt it, you Googled it, found it, and were better able to participate in the meeting going forward? So they just codified it for their language. so that they guaranteed it was the way that they wanted it used internally to the company. Media files, capturing and sharing media. People are building whole sites now where you can capture your own screen, show how to do something, capture it as a video, upload it to a portal, and suddenly anybody at their desktop can help somebody else solve a problem. So anything you're already producing in videos, make it available for sharing. Also make it available for mobile access, but different talk. Home Depot has created a series of videos how to do common things that their customers want to do, how to refinish a floor, how to build a deck. Sure, you can find that stuff on YouTube, but this stuff is quality production. Home Depot is I don't know if they have them here. They have their big hardware warehouse in the US chain. They've put out those videos, and people can go there and figure out how to do things and get trusted advice. Now, if they need to go trusted advice about products, where do you think they're going to go? They build a brand. Make people think, oh, this is a cool place. And if they're doing cool things with video, maybe I want to be there too. Another story told in a session I gave, and unfortunately, she was just an audience member and I didn't get her organization, so I don't know which one it was, but it was an engineering firm. And the different engineering groups were continuing to make new advances, and they'd write white papers on it. And then the engineers in other groups wanted to read these white papers, but they couldn't find time. So what did the learning group do? They got somebody to read the white papers into a microphone. They stored it as podcasts available for downloading. And the engineers could listen to the white papers on their commute to work. And they came back to a typically unwelcome learning and development group and demanded more of their services, because it was powerful learning and sharing within the organization. Now, if more people know about all the cool things going on in other parts, do you think that's going to spark more conversations, more innovations, and more ideas? Absolutely. What's the value of knowing who knows what, and who's around, and what they do, and what they're interested in? It's the value of profiles, of communities, where you can now, I have met people online in communities that I've been desperate to meet face to face because I just like so much what they have to say, how they say it. And when you get together with these people, it's like a party. It's amazing. I have had that happen, then I meet them, and it's like I've known them forever. SAP created a network for their developers. It's been a huge cost savings for them. It let them reduce their support resources. Why? Because customers started helping each other. A customer using SAP who had solved a problem, somebody else had that same problem, they'd give them the answer. Moreover, by seeing who answered a lot of questions, they knew who really knew their product. Oh, wow, maybe we'd like to offer them a job. Get them talking not, to you about your brand, get them talking about your product in ways and solutions. Caterpillar internally created a communities practice. They have thousands of them, I think, if I remember the figures right. They found a huge return on investment for this. Powerful. Caterpillar, a manufacturer of large construction equipment, is valued, 85% of its stock value is its intangible assets, only 15% on its tangible assets. This is the power of sharing knowledge and beginning to capitalize on that in useful ways. How about Twitter? Microblogging, excuse me. I've got to use the generic term. People might use Yammer or something else instead. The ability to put in a short space anything up there, a question, a pointer, a thought, and an idea. Don't you think that's useful? I have a personal story on this one. I was asked by Oracle. They had developed a networking application they called, I think it was Connect. And they were using it with their customers. And they decided they wanted to bring it inside, and the Learning and Development Group wanted to get the global team on board and figure out how to use this. So they asked me to come in and work with them on social learning. The interesting thing is, I wanted to know a little bit more about their product than the Learning and Development Group knew, so I just tweeted, anybody know anything about Oracle Connect or Mix? And Mix was the term they were going to use inside. 3 hours later. I just threw it out there. I didn't know anybody in their group. 3 hours later, Jake Kuramato responded. I can tell you just about all you'll ever want to know about Connect and Mix, because he's the guy who wrote it. Literally. He'd seen Facebook and decided to write in Oracle's own database environment a social media system And that's what they were using. And I got to talk directly to the guy who wrote it. And I got my questions answered, and I was far better equipped to go into that meeting and talk to those people about what they could do with Oracle. I mean, the power of that. And people, somebody couldn't figure out how to start his car, and he tweeted it out. It was like David Pogue or somebody, or Andrew McAfee or somebody, and got an answer through Twitter, was able to start his car and go off. Just random stuff. Powerful learning. And then the way that we use LearnChat. Best Buy. Do you have Best Buy here in Australia? It's an electronics retailer. Sells, you know, everything from CDs to DVD players to Bluetooth, whatever. If you tweet a problem with technology, they'll respond. They have a team of people who are just there to answer questions about using technology appropriately. Do you think people are liable to go to Best Buy to buy products? Do you think people might like to be one of the cool tech guys who works there? Absolutely. Meredith is a publisher. They're using an internal tool, Yammer. They've been able to increase their productivity, reduce email, powerful outcomes by using just microblogging capabilities. And the tools for these are exploding. Anybody, you know, in fact, we're getting a bit of a bubble, I'm afraid to say. It used to be, you know, when the PCs came out, anybody who could write code said, oh, I'm a company that can write software, and you get the snake oil salesman. Then we saw the internet bubble. Well, now it's, and then there was an LMS bubble. Well, now it's the social media bubble. Anybody who can program a database is building a tool, and they want to sell it to you. But some of them get, you know, the real inherent nature, and you want to figure those out. And the problem is, and everybody keeps adding all the features. So now most of these all have blogs and wikis and microblogs and profiles and everything else. But it's not a case of if you build it, they will learn. If you put in, you know, oh, wow, we want to tap into this. Let's put a social media system into our company, and people will start contributing. And you put it in there, nothing happens. Because it takes more than just the tool and even the ability to use it. It's got to be safe. Let me tell you a story. This is a company I worked at while I was a grad student. I did a consulting job for them over the summer. This was a long time ago, and they were getting an IT infrastructure put in, independent of what I was doing with them. But they had bought a standard IT package to do automate their business. It's owned by ex-US military. They said, oh, but please turn off that email function. We don't want people just wasting their time talking about parties and stuff. Can you imagine turning off email? You might wish you could, but it's become so common in business. It's this classic stuff. They're afraid that people would waste their time. These people had phones. They waste their time. The technology doesn't matter. Another story, I was at a university medical school, and they had these really totally kitted out labs where you know, they had PowerPoints at the desk and seated circular and wireless going on, and the medical school instructors were saying, the professor was saying, we want you to turn off the internet access while they're in the class. There could be day trading. Yeah? If you turn off the internet access, they could be playing solitaire. And if you take away the laptop, they could be doodling or playing tic-tac-toe. You can lead a learner to learning, but you can't make them think. To paraphrase Dorothy Parker. It's crazy. If you don't trust people, your problem is not the social media. If your people aren't empowered to do things that are important and believe in it, the vision and mission, taking or leaving social media isn't going to solve the problem. People take the social media cigarette break, as Robert Gadd told me. If you block the network, they just go outside and replaces the cigarette break. Now they go outside and connect to the network, go to Facebook with their smartphone, check in with their buddies. You can't stop the signal. You've got to not try and fight this. Take this on, take this opportunity. Make it happen. You need, Garvin and Edmondson have looked at what leads to success in getting organizations to work together and learn. You need a supportive learning environment. Do you think if anything you say can and will be used against you, by your boss, are you going to contribute? If you give away your knowledge of how you do it and then we'll get fired, are you going to participate and play? No. It's got to be safe. They've got to tolerate diversity of opinions. They've got to be open to new ideas. They've got to make it a place where you can contribute safely. And then you need to have leaders modeling it. They not only need to support it and say this is good, they need to be demonstrating it. They need to be showing themselves using the technology, thinking out loud, learning out loud is one of my mantras, because other people can see how you learn. And if they're sharing their thoughts, they're going to get people on board. It helps build that culture you want, which makes it a place where people want to work and will want to come to, because they can tell. And it's not just using social media outside with customers and not turning it inside. You've got to show that you get it, and it's connected all the way from the outside to the inside. And then you've got to be concrete about it. Don't take learning in this environment skills for granted. People will not know how to ask questions, will cut off conversation by stupid things. The role of the HR department, of the learning and development function, is going to shift from dumping knowledge on people's heads that doesn't stick, it doesn't work, to learning facilitators. They have to. In fact, that's going to be a new job category you're going to have to be recruiting for. Is learning facilitators, people who can go in and look at a community. It takes a lot. You need to first seed it. You may have to go out and get some of the people who are respected by others in this group and get them to participate. You may have to even incent them, reward them for doing it. Would you do this for us? Let's get this going. We're going to tap it into it. And then you need to feed it. You need to make sure people are finding value out of this community. Because if they're not, they won't go there. But if they're finding value, and so you might have to intervene, and the people who do this are important. And you might have to look at how people are using the system and help them use it more effectively. You might cull some of the information that comes out and codify it so there's still some of that formal knowledge. But it's not everything. And then you have to weed it. You might find people acting inappropriately or misusing it, and you just want to take them aside and coach them. Some of them may have to throw up, but, or any bad information that's coming in. Misconceptions you might want to get rid of. So you got to weed it. And then finally, when it gets going, and Nancy White talks about not-for-profit circles, this can take up to 18 months for these things to become self-sustaining, but then you can breed it. Feed, seed, weed, and breed. The way you get social media to go and become viral through the company. Really, we're changing what John Husband calls hierarchy. We're shifting from hierarchy, top-down, one person doing the thinking for everybody. That's not agile. That's not nimble. That's not innovative. You're not going to get it from there. You've got to move to hierarchy, where people are connected and understand the vision and mission and what they need to do, and then they can contribute. Rote stuff ought to be automated. You need people to be doing the hard work, the work that's going to add value to the organization, knowledge work. You need to give them the tools and the possibility and the vision to succeed. The point is not to have all these tools, to go back instead to recognize that not just our novices, but our practitioners and our experts need support, and they need support if at the desktop or when they're out and about. 72% of workers are mobile in the US. Wait a minute, how could that be? Even with Salesforce and field service techs, not that 72% of the workforce. How many of you have to stay in touch while you're still at this conference? You're a mobile worker. If people have to go do site visits from time to time, or if they're away from their desk in their office and in a meeting room, they're a mobile worker. And social. And it's not to have all these tools, it's to make sure you're covering all the needs. The information needs that are going to let people find the answers they need, do the job, find the collaborators they need to get the work done. I think and it's only growing. It's only expanding. Our understanding, as I think Sylvia said earlier, our understanding of social learning is still being developed. Absolutely. We want to continue to explore and experiment as part of what we're doing. Even some of the most fixed knowledge. How many of you are concerned about compliance with certain regulations you absolutely have to get along with? Yeah, I figured there was more of you than I first saw. Those seem to come from above, but eventually I think the communities are going to be determining their own competencies needed because they're going to be changing too fast. There may be some groups at the top, but they're going to be people from the community And that process should be transparent, so other people can add value, and it can be as good as it can be, not as good as the small group can make it. We need to shift in our thinking. We need to stop thinking about top-down, formal, one person thinking for everybody, give the formal knowledge. We need to start shifting differently, just think about facilitating and collaborating and working together to get our needs met. And outside, working with people, our customers, our potential recruits, find out what they want, have that dialogue, and figure out how to make your company a place that's successful and great to work at. And you've got to be in it to win it, as the saying goes. I think that's our lotto slogan in California. Create a profile. If you're not on Facebook or LinkedIn, create a profile, but if you haven't, do it. And I really recommend Facebook. Set up some RSS feeds. Start following somebody just to see what the experience is. Start tapping into a source of knowledge of somebody who has thinking you might respect and think, I want to see where their thinking is going. It's a form of virtual mentorship. If you follow their blogs and their tweets, you can see, and if there's people who you think are leading thinkers, you can follow them. And they won't even know you're there, and yet they are teaching you. If you take the effort to understand where their thinking is going, you can keep track of what's going on. You become more powerful, and other people can. Both internal and external. How many people have somebody blogging in their company? Or wow. That's going to make it difficult, the internal part, isn't it? But do it yourself, internal, but external. Find those people outside in the industry who you think are worth following. Contribute to the discussion. Don't just consume. Start contributing as well. Add your comments to their blog posts. Ask questions if you don't understand or want to understand where that thinking is going. And start blogging yourself. Don't take it, make it some sort of fanatical thing you'll never be able to do. Just try and get one post a week out. It's really easy, to get a free account. It takes a matter of minutes. Just try it. Try putting your thinking out there. Even if nobody reads it, don't tell anybody the link if you're worried about it at first, but get that habit of putting your thoughts out there, thinking things through. Post a media file. Interview yourself. Take a flip video and interview yourself, or audio, make a little mental note, put it up there somewhere. Get on Twitter. You can't really understand the power. I didn't get the Twitter value proposition, but people I trusted said, get in there. Jim Schuyler said, look, I and Marsha on here, you got to get in here. So I got in there, and then I began to get it. And I didn't get it until I got in it. And be active. Commit to 7 weeks as an arbitrary number. You can't just do it in 1 week and think you've got, you've got to get the experience. You've got to get some of the mechanics out of the way so you can start reflecting on the higher level of the experience. And when you do that, you have the opportunity to get it. Now, I want to ask you to do something for me. I want you to stop a minute and think, what am I going to do tomorrow or next week as a consequence of this? And the reason I ask you to do this is because I'm hoping when you do that, you go, oh, but I've got this barrier, or oh, I didn't really understand that. Because now you have a question to ask when we go to the questions. Hopefully. Thank you very much for your time and understanding.